If we go back like a couple hundred years, it was pretty normal to own slaves. Is that right or correct?
Why are we talking about slavery?
Because I'm showing you why the ad populum fallacy is a logical fallacy.
Honestly, back then, a lot of Black people participated in the slave trade themselves. So
Yeah, that doesn't make slavery right. Are you trying to defend
it was a
slavery?
product of the time, dude. It
Are
was
you
a
trying to
product of the
defend
time.
slavery?
Did you not see Matt Walsh's new video on this topic?
In fact, it seems rather clear that Black Americans are doing better here today than they would be had their ancestors generations ago never been brought to these shores. We can prove this point by simply asking which African country anyone asking for reparations would prefer to live in. The answer, of course, is none of them.
One of the biggest brain dead arguments that racists always make about how, well, black people are better off nowadays because slavery happened. I mean, look at African countries now. Name a single one where you'd want to live. Well, they don't name places like Nigeria, Algeria, Tunisia, South Africa, Egypt, Ghana, places where people often go to relocate and places that have heavy influence over the African economy and where many industries are budding. Not only that, they don't take into consideration the hundreds of years of colonization and how France is still mining minerals and European countries are still taking resources from the African continent, and how in many ways through warlords and just so many different types of conflicts that have happened as a result of colonization, many of the African countries simply haven't caught up with Western society. So it's really just a stupid argument to be made, on top of the fact that there are a variety of African countries that are pretty wealthy and where people live pretty good lives. But when you turn on the television in America, all you see is that same hungry kid that they've been showing on TV for the last 30 years. And that's what people think, or at least people like Matt Walsh think, when they think about African countries.
So I'm just going to say that in general, I think it's wrong to own humans.
Of course, we're not in that time period anymore.
But you're defending slavery.
I'm not defending it. I'm saying it was a product of the time.
And then when people talk about slavery, like, well, that's just kind of how things were back then, and now we don't have it. That's not true whatsoever. Slavery still happens today. It's one of the most negative parts of the human reality that people have been doing to each other since civilization has existed. In fact, we know slavery still exists in places like Libya, Burundi, the Central African Republic, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Pakistan, Cambodia, places like Dubai, Saudi Arabia. Slavery is still China, you know what I'm saying? The Uyghur slaves. Slavery is still something that happens. So it's not like it's just a thing of the past. Which is very problematic when people talk about it like that. Like, oh, it was just, something that we just got past and now America's standing on top and black people are better off because of it. No, again, it's not gone. So talking about it in the past tense really isn't helpful for anybody.
You said that black people enjoy being slaves.
I think there were probably a good majority of Black people who back then were born and raised as slaves, probably because that's the only thing they knew. It was the environment they grew up in. If they had a slave owner who treated them well, they probably enjoyed their lives, a few of them. I think it's illogical to believe that every person who was a slave back then hated their life. I truly think that's illogical. I do.
I'm pretty sure that being owned is not a good thing.
And then for like 2 minutes, they argued about how, well, there were, I'm sure there were some slaves who enjoyed it because that's all they knew. I mean, why was that even a point that was brought up? I mean, what would that have been if there was anybody who did enjoy it? What, like 0.2% of the entire slave population, 0.1% of the entire slave population? Why are we even discussing this? Why is this even a part of the argument? But again, and then she pointed out that, well, did you listen to Matt Walsh, the guy who went on Joe Rogan and said that millions of children are being forced to undergo, gender reconstruction and different types of surgeries and stuff like that. And it's like, actually, the number's pretty low. It's under 1,000. And then he was like, oh, well, going from 1,000 to millions is quite a jump. So obviously this isn't a man who we should be looking to for any type of intellectual leadership. But this whole conversation was ridiculous. And the way that some conservatives still talk about slavery just shows how ignorant and uninterested in history and reality they truly are.